Okay, the next thing we need to do with our code is finish up in our task main. So each one of these lines of code has to have a comment. So I'm going to hit the tab button a couple times to go over, and I'm going to make two forward slashes. This is the key underneath your question mark right next to your shift button. So make those two forward slashes, and when you do that, they should turn green. This tells the code that it's a comment. And I'm going to write what this line of code does. This line of code turns on the right motor at half speed. Okay, there's my comment for that line of code. Every line of code has to have a comment. This is part of your grade. This is part of proper code protocol. Your code will work without these comments, but nobody will actually look at a code that doesn't have comments because it tells people that you're being sloppy, that you're not trying to be thorough. It's a proper part of code, just like capital letters at the beginning of a sentence. Your sentence can still mean the same thing if you don't use capital letters at the beginning, but we all know that you need a capital letter at the beginning. This is the same thing with comments. You just have to have them, so get used to it. Now I'm going to hit my tab key over, and I'm going to put a comment on my second line of code, so two of those forward slashes again, and this line of code waits 5 seconds. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. My last line of code, I'm going to hit the tab key over again, two forward slashes, and this line of code turns off the right motor. Okay, so there is a lot of redundancy in code. You're doing a lot of the same things over and over again, but that's what makes your code work. Think about when we get into more complex codes that have dozens of lines or even hundreds of lines. Some code has hundreds of thousands of lines. These comments are what help us find mistakes. So it's really important you get used to writing those comments. Okay, now that we have comments, we need to tell the robot where we are going to plug in this motor. So up here at the top, there's a button that says Motor and Sensor Setup. I'm going to click on that button, and I'm going to make sure, like right now I'm in the Digital Sensor tab. I'm not writing a code for sensors. I'm writing a code for motors. So I'm going to go over here to where it says Motors, and I'm going to click on Motors. And remember, I said we're never going to use port 1 or 10. I'm going to plug the right motor into port 2. So in port 2, I'm going to type right motor, and I'm going to tell it on this drop-down type that it's a VEX 393 motor. So click on that. Your screen should look just like mine. In port 2, it should say right motor, and it should say VEX 393 motor, and then click Apply and click OK. Up at the top of your code in line 1, this auto-generated this pragma right here. Pragma for your motor is in port 2. It's the right motor, and it's a VEX 393 on a motor controller open loop. This is all correct. Now, if you click compile, it's not going to give you any errors. If I were to come down here and maybe let's say I accidentally typed 2 T's in right motor, and then I clicked compile. Compile is where it's going to check my code and tell me if there's any errors. Now this error right here is telling me that my error right here is in line 23. So I can look at line 23 and down here it'll tell me line 23, the error is an undefined variable right motor. So that tells me it's probably a spelling mistake. If it's undefined variable and I know I did my pragma, it is defined, I'm going to check the spelling, and then I can notice, oh, I've got too many T's, so let me delete that T, click compile again, and now that I don't have any X's, I know that my code is good. If I were to change this M and make it lowercase and click compile, I get a yellow X. This yellow X says it's going to substitute a similar variable. That similar variable means it can tell that I forgot to capitalize that M. It wants me to fix it, but it will go ahead and run the code for me anyway. But to be perfectly correct and get a good score on your code, make sure that when you hit compile, you don't have any errors. So when you take a snip of this to turn it in, so down here at the bottom, type snip, open up your snipping tool, click on New, take a picture of your code, make sure I can see all of it. Okay, I need to see your pragma. I need to see your project title up here at the top with your name and the date and your bell number. I need to see your task description. I need to see your pseudocode, and I need to see your code with all the comments. So all of this has to be here when you turn in your code. So then you'll click copy, and you'll go to Teams, and you'll click on this practice programming document, and you will paste your code in this document. So Control V, you'll paste that in there, and then you'll turn it in, okay? So don't forget to snip your code and turn it in. The next thing we're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna download your code. So go back to your test bed. You're gonna take the right motor and you're gonna grab this black and red wire, and you're going to get a motor controller. You're gonna plug the motor controller into that right motor. You can see it right here. You can see how the motor plugs into the motor controller. Make sure you line up the red wire with the red wire and the black wire with the black wire. Plug it in to port 2. So when you look at your Cortex, make sure it plugs in over here to port 2. And then you are going to use your orange USB cable, and you are going to plug that orange USB cable right here into the top of your VexNet Cortex. And down here in the front, you're going to plug in your battery right there, and you're going to turn it on. Now that orange USB cable, so your blue battery plugs in here, turn the Cortex on. And then up here, after you plug in the motor, you're going to plug in your orange USB cable to the Cortex, and you'll plug the other end of the USB cable, the orange one, into your computer. Once you have everything plugged in, you're going to click Download to Robot. When you click Download to Robot, see, mine's telling me no communication available because I don't have one plugged in right now, but yours will have a pop-up window that says Start. Click Start, and if your motor runs, your code is correct, and you've done everything properly, and you can turn it in. If you have any problems, ask your neighbor for some help or ask Mr. Hartman. And that's your first code. Great job, guys.